Good morning, friends. It is currently about 5:45 in the morning, and I gotta say, this sucks. Have you ever had a hobby idea that just kind of burns a hole in your head until you do something about it? During the recent creation of my multi-hour long epic that is the Badab War video, which you should go watch if you haven't, I was reminded of an old memory when making the model for the Mantis warriors in particular. Let me tell you about it. When I was young, like 9-10 years old, I was walking through a little field in the middle of our neighborhood road, which was basically a small cul-de-sac inside of some Navy housing. We were walking to the other side of the cul-de-sac to visit another friend of ours. We were playing Tales of Symphonia as a group after school at her house, although we'd occasionally watch anime and engage in general weeb shittery over there. We were walking under some trees, and my friend said, "Hey dude, you got a praying mantis on your head." And me, being a very young baby child, had no fucking clue what a praying mantis was, so I reached up and lifted this little thing I could feel on top of my head, only to be met with the face only a mother could love. It startled the shit out of me, having landed on my head with no sound or impact whatsoever, but it became one of those small moments you never forget. Thinking about that incident and had me thinking about praying mantises in general. They're just kind of oddly shaped. Thinking about praying mantises made me want to do an exercise in both translation and theming to make a mantis warrior that looks more like a praying mantis without getting a little hokey with it. During the production of Badab, Jay from Eons of Battle actually made his own Mantis Warrior Terminator while I had one on my schedule. And let me be very clear about something. I like Jay. Jay is like the more productive, good version of me, and I take a lot of pride in being the evil twin. And in general, when it comes to creative hobby, I think direct comparisons are a little bit in bad taste. You know, it's kind of subjective at the end of the day. But I gotta admit, I wasn't super crazy about how his Mantis Warrior Terminator came out. I'm not a huge fan of the helmet modifications that he made, and I gotta admit, I don't really get the choice of the pincer claw. And don't get me wrong, when I made my Mantis Warrior Terminator, it was fairly plain Jane. When I was making those models, I try to have some a little bit more extravagant than others, and the Mantis Warriors ended up on the plain side. However, the idea of a redo was just absolutely consuming my soul, and I realized I can just do that. So hopefully this time I can make something a little bit more, not necessarily good, something I'm more happy with. Is that the word? Something tolerable. I started my build off with a Reaver body. Technically, an incursor or infiltrator body is a little bit better in Phobos terms, since the leg pouches are a little bit more customizable. The first thing I did was trim the butt plate. I wanted to add a butt cape to reinforce the back shape of a mantis's abdomen and wings. I could have added straight green stuff, but shaving down the top to account for the thickness of the green stuff will make the cape look properly tucked underneath his belt. I also ended up doing the same for the cod piece. Now, I did consider rolling out a proper cape, but since this is such a small project and the fabrics are going to look distressed, I've decided to use the fast green stuff pull method. I've done this before on projects like my Athonian tunnel rats, and it makes for solid enough fabric strips of small sizes. You get some green stuff and pull strips with a uniform pressure. If you've ever pulled a handle for pottery, it's the same method, using steady pressure down the whole length of the strip. The ends will naturally want to tear because green stuff is a little more on the rubbery side, and you should let it, which should produce a nice ragged strip of cloth. When cut to length and attached, I give it a bit of a stylized wisp to it, as if the wind is blowing it slightly. I do the same with two smaller strips on the back side, which are supposed to invoke the shape of a mantis's wings, with a third larger cloth going over it after these two strips cure fully. Note that if your strips are too thin, they may not hold shape in the direction you want. Baby it a little bit until it partially cures, then let it fully cure while hanging at an angle. My strips were flowing away from the model, so the ends of the strips were pointing downward when it cured, with the model basically resting while tilted backwards almost 90 degrees. While all of this cured, I made some modifications to the head, for which I chose this large incursor head that's for like the radar thingy, whatever. I don't know the name. While the antennae of the helmet obviously invoke a Mantis's, I wanted to also transfer the Mantis's compound eyes onto the model, which I felt would also add to his vibe as a scout with like big multi-lens cameras. For this, I grabbed some 2.4mm styrene tube and some sprue goo, although I noticed that I may have refilled my bottle of it with too much. I cut into the tube to match the curvature of the helmet and cemented it on. I kept it long so I can just trim it down to length later. It wasn't a perfect fit, but that's fine. I chose to fill these smaller gaps with green stuff, more yellow than blue, to give it a bit more strength. After trimming the tube, I chose to insert a small disc of a smaller millimeter styrene rod for the lens, completing the basic eye scope. I did briefly consider adding 2 of these to the helmet, but thought it might have looked a little goofy, so. However, I did essentially move the second eye's function and aesthetic to the backpack camera with the use of this incursor/infiltrator power pack. I also added grav chutes. Jump pack may have been a bit more aesthetic for my Firstborn fans, but I genuinely cannot separate the concept of silently dropping onto my head from what a praying mantis is in its purest essence. It's an association I'll never, ever, ever be able to separate. And I don't know, it makes the model a little more personal to me. Plus, we've done jump pack models in the past. We've got a little room for grav chute, guys. With all of these parts attached, we have a solid base for the model. Now we get to the most important part, which is the arms. While there are plenty of weapons to give our Marine, I've been looking to recreate a Mantis's physical shape over the model, and I feel the best way to do this is reverse grip knives. Sourcing knives for each hand can be a little tricky. The regular Intercessor box and the new Deathwatch box are examples of kits with right hand knives, and the Assault Intercessors also have their own left hand knife. Reavers obviously fit the bill too, with their very big left hand knife, and the Incursor box even has a knife throwing right hand. With some clever cutting, you can also make any hand holding a pistol into a knife holding hand, but I chose to use some existing bits for ease of acquisition, and also I already own them, so. With a repositioning on the left arm's shoulder, I'd say it's looking like a proper praying mantis. And now we just need a pauldron. While I recently commissioned an artist to recreate every Badab War chapter pauldron, which is available for free on my Discord, by the way, I did explicitly mention forgetting to ask for Phobo shoulder pads, which, not gonna lie, would have been really fucking handy right now, but we'll improvise. How about some shoulder studs? Everybody likes a good stud. I map out a diamond pattern on a blank Phobos pauldron, using a metal awl to punch guide marks for my pin vise. Holes were drilled into each mark, going just deep enough to rest each stud about halfway into the pauldron. After poking some superglue into each hole, I lay 1.2mm ball bearings into each hole. 1.2mm bearings are very close size match to the studs found on the newer Horus Heresy kits, so that's why I chose this size in particular when I purchased them. With the studs in and the pauldron on, it was looking really good. The final step was to cover this guy in knife sheaths, occupied or not. In my head, this guy is an expert knife fighter and duelist of sorts. Knives may get dropped or even thrown in the heat of battle, so it pays to have a few extra. Plus, it kind of lends a bit to the tactical aesthetic. One thing I didn't notice when I did it is that the two sheaths on the front of his belt kind of end up looking like mandibles in a sense. Some more of that subliminal Mantis propaganda. Anyways, I think I'm nearing the legal limit of how much shit you can strap onto one Marine, so let's stop here and go ahead and get him painted up. Having recently painted Mantis warriors for the Badab War video, I do have a guide of sorts that I could follow. However, there were some parts of it that I'm not super happy about, therefore I'm going to try some new recipes, starting with a light green and a brown mixture. This gives me a solid dookie green to use as a base coat. Next, I mix my green and yellow together for a dry brush color, dry brushing the majority of the armor. Finally, I took pure yellow and added just a tiny drop of green to use for the edge highlights, just enough to tint it. I maybe could have gotten away with just pure bone for this step, but this keeps green consistent through the entire color palette and makes sure the highlights don't look a little cold, I guess would be the way I would describe it. I don't know what I'm talking about. Just keep that in mind. For my wash, I opted not actually use my trusty marine juice, instead making a 1-to-1 mix of Bealtan green and glaze medium. This ensures we get nice part separation with a dark green in the recesses and also some minor gradients on flatter panels, although I did opt to clean up more than leave to pool since I didn't want any ugly pooling, over pooling. With that, the armor was basically done. So I started painting the skirting with bone. These areas were given a light shading with a brown wash, then a highlight of pure white on the edges. I needed to do the yellow areas as well, so I base coated the shoulders and faceplate with a pure white in order to paint on contrast Imperial Fist. I base coated everything that would either be silver or black with black. This preps us for gray highlights, or in the case of the silver areas, a much easier time base coating them. I find it easiest to basically roll these into the same step. Various areas like the sheaths and armor joints got gray edge highlights, then the knife blades, shoulder studs, and scopes got a single coat of silver before getting a black wash. I considered silver on the knife sheaths, but figured a little gold might show some rank at a glance, maybe Phobos Lieutenant, I don't know. While painting the knives, I randomly decided to try a quick Damascus pattern. Damascus steel is formed in layers, which produces a very nice wavy pattern when the steel is properly formed, polished, and dipped. With the blade being a gunmetal silver, I took my very bright silver and made some wavy lines over the blades. This was a pretty low effort take, don't get me wrong, but it did give me some ideas for perfecting this down the line, including thinner lines and possibly mixing white into the silver for an even brighter level of silver that I could use to create additional layers of waves. For the last step, we'll go ahead and knock out the eyes, and I wanted to get the essence of the praying mantis eyes. Instead of painting the big lenses normally, I opt to paint each one with tiny highlight dots of a pinky red, as if each of these camera lenses has multiple cameras in it, like a compound eye. Despite what I'm doing, this was actually a pretty easy thing to fix if I ever messed up, as I could simply paint my red back over to mess up any of the dots. And after quite literally dotting the I's and crossing some T's, I very quickly shat out a very boring base, admittedly in like 2 minutes, and called it done. So in my quest to satisfy my curiosity after the Badab War video, did I make my ideal Mantis warrior? Honestly, I got pretty damn close actually. I know some people won't enjoy the fat Phobos comm helmet, but I think it plays into the narrative of it being more of a recon unit or some kind of unit with better detection. The physicality of the model also hits all the visual points that I initially set out to. Being Phobos means the Marine is a little bit leaner than usual. The Mantis abdomen is recreated in the hind cloak. A large head with 2 big compound eyes are found to some extent up top. And most importantly, the praying mantis' unique arm is emulated with the grip of the knife. I also prefer the coloration of this Mantis warrior compared to my attempt in the Badab War video. While that could be attributed to a difference in technique being dry brushed compared to sponged, I think it's more a matter of color distribution. The Mantis warrior's signature yellowy green base coat can be found in the Terminator's highlights, but having it be a larger portion of the base coat spectrum leads to the color being more prominent overall, leading to a less flat green model or a dark green model. Additionally, the base coats that I used in the Tartaros Terminator were a little bit on the cold side of green, which I feel having warmer greens, like even in the shadows, benefits the newer model. That's why I chose to use brown instead of black for my darker base coat. However, I do prefer some things on the Tartaros Terminator, like the darker recessed areas. So I think down the line, a combination of these techniques is probably the way to go. I'm thinking of starting from black and sponging on the first layer of dark green as I did for the Terminator, but using the Phobos's green and brown, the Dookie green color for that sponging. From there, then I would dry brush on the yellow green and then do the almost like greeny bone highlights, if that made sense. I don't know, maybe it doesn't. Whenever I finish a project, I try to look at it and I try to learn something from it, you know? So this is just me speculating. There is a solid chance that this Mantis Warrior is simply just okay, and there's not much to learn from it. Maybe it's the best Mantis Warrior ever painted. I'm not going to say that, but I'm going to highly imply it. But at the very least, the burning desire to make a mantis-shaped marine is finally satisfied. I like to say thank you for watching, and if you like the video, give it the usual engagements. There's a new hype button that apparently helps the video and the algorithm. So like if you like something, you can then hype it. But I haven't had that option anywhere, and it's like I feel like it's like a schizophrenic kind of feature. Everyone's hyping videos, and I'm like, what? I'm not. How do you guys do this? Is everyone in on the joke except me? This is a smaller last minute end of the year video kind of idea. And while my intent was to definitely try this idea out, I figured I'd try to get it out before the New Year's to kind of make up for the Badab War video drought. I didn't initially expect it to take that many months, and I wanted to try to throw you guys a little bit of a bone for being so patient. We have 2 new patrons since the Your Dudes 3 video where I created subscriber armies, and I'd like to say thank you to them for their support. I'd like to say thank you to John Watt and Maximum Jackson. We are reaching the absolute limit of Jackson levels, and we are going to previously uncharted territory. We are off the scales with how much Jackson this channel has. Let's just no, this is Jackson's lab now. Thank you guys, and thank you to all of my patrons for their support. After the holidays and New Year's, we're going to hit the ground running with a community project featuring our Death Watch, what's it called again? Which will include a small channel update section as well, just to give us all an idea of what we're dealing with in 2026. Additionally, after the New Year's, we'll have more community builds going up. So if that sounds fun to you guys, make sure to join the Discord. I think next one's probably going to be Chaos Marines, but then we're also going to have a non-GW game, which is probably going to be Trench Crusade. We're still testing the waters there. But as for actual 2026 video ideas, I've got way too many. way too many. Plenty of 40k, more 40k than I would probably be comfortable with putting out, but I just have so many ideas and so much material to use. I also want to do more skirmish level stuff like Mordheim and Trench Crusade. I know I've been saying it for a while, but I do have a fun idea for a Mordheim warband that I really want to do. Hopefully Gundam Assembly isn't delayed again. I do have some minis, and I want to show off a little bit of conversion work. And we also have the new StarCraft board game on the horizon, which I'm very excited for because I'm a huge StarCraft fan. 2026 is going to be a very big year, and I'm very excited to get into it with you guys. So once again, thank you for watching. I'll see you guys after the new year. Please keep an eye on the community posts and Discord for updates, and I'm hungry. I'm gonna go snack. Actually, no. Oh, I don't have any snacks. I forgot to go to Kroger's. Fuck.